Here we go. So we're going to start off by talking about the some of the events I've gone on this summer, and I'll probably turn off my screen after this bit shortly. But there's been quite a few events that's happened over the summer, and just to kind of give a bit of a gauge into some of what's happened, we've had London's Calling, the London World Tour, and around those two events, there was also two events in Europe, one in Prague, which was Czech Dreaming, and one in Amsterdam, which was Year Dreaming. And there's been a load of people who've been at either one of these events, two of these events, or in some cases, all of these events. And these have been really, really good for the community. It seems to be that the community has really kind of wanted to actually do in-person stuff again, and these have been some really great stuff, and the content's been really, really good across, particularly the community event side of it as well. London's Calling, the recordings for that should be coming out sometime soon. To be honest, I haven't checked the Hoover apps, so I don't know if they're on there yet, but they will be coming onto their YouTube channel later on this year. Recordings for Year Dreaming's already out as well on their YouTube channel, and Czech Dreaming didn't record, to my knowledge, so we've only got slide decks for that. But I just thought it would be good just kind of talk a little bit about that, and see who went to these, any of these, and what people thought. So I think at this point I can stop sharing my screen. And yeah, did anybody go to any of these events, and kind of how did they find them? I know, Katrina, you were at London's Corners. I just saw you come off mute. So
yeah, I went to London's Calling. It was my first conference, and it was massively overwhelming, but really, really good. Had a fantastic day, was completely exhausted by the end of it. But yeah, it was just, I've actually been on a bit of a low since I came back, because I'm a solo admin in my company. And I hadn't really appreciated how much I was missing working as part of a team where everybody's focused on the same thing. So I'm the only person in my company that's really focused on Salesforce, is digesting Salesforce information, attending webinars, keeping track of the news. So being in a room with however many thousand people that were all interested in the same thing, were all excited by the same thing, was incredible. So yeah, it was really, really good.
I guess, see, Rob, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say to Katrina, I've also been there as a solo admin, well, probably more solo developer, but certainly solo person in charge of Salesforce. And the first time I went to Dreamforce back in 2011, it was a similar sort of situation in that, they'd sent me out to Dreamforce, but I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the community back then. And yeah, it is overwhelming. And that sudden dawning realization that actually, your colleagues in the Salesforce space aren't always necessarily the ones that you sit with in the office. They're the wider ecosystem, the people that you can share war stories with, talk shop with, and really sort of, get the experience of that. So I think sometimes, if it is your kind of first experience of the Salesforce community, it's a useful way to think of them as like, colleagues that just don't work in the same company, because we're all fighting the same fight together, governor limits and deployments, which we'll come on to obviously later, and and all the other fun little challenges that we have. So yeah, I completely get where Katrina's coming from in terms of, if it's your first event and you're not necessarily aware of that broader ecosystem as much yet, it's quite a lot to take in.
Yeah absolutely.
Yeah, yes, I remember my first event as well. My first event was also London's Corner, but that was 2019. So I'd been in the ecosystem for about 3 years as a solo admin predominantly as well. And at that point, for me personally, it was quite a tough one, because the thing was, I don't know anybody, like similar to what you were saying, Katrina. I'm a bit of an introvert myself, and also I was struggling with depression and anxiety at the same time, and also that was when I was on my medication for it as well. So that wasn't quite the easiest time to be my first event. That being said, though, some of the people I met there are people I talk to every day, who I don't work with, who are in different companies. Some of the people, one of the people I met there, who was very, very nice to me, happens to now be one of my bosses. So, you just don't know how these events can really kind of like help you in your career and just in that community aspect. And it was, and like, to be honest, like we were actually meant to have this group started up like around that time, but I ended up not launching because of where I was at personally at the time. But that was good to be there now. So it's really, I always enjoyed London Calling, and for me personally, it was like on my bucket list of ones to speak at eventually, and was really tough when it actually finally happened this year after applying for 3 years straight and not getting in. Yeah. And did anybody else go to any of the events? And
well, the one thing that I was really good about, Mark, is that you and I were talking at the same time.
True, because I wanted to go to your session.
I know, and I wanted to come to yours. I'll have to catch up on the YouTube recording when they're released.
I didn't go to any of the ones in Europe, but I've been to DevOps Dreaming in Chicago and then TDX a few weeks afterwards. See a thumbs up there from Rob. I don't think I saw you there, but there were so many Gearset people there that it was quite hard to keep track of.
No, that was about 2 or 3 weeks before I joined Gearset.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, we've got a London one coming up, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'll drop all the details. I don't want to spoil it for everyone, but yes, there is a London one coming. Bit easier to get to for us than Chicago.
Yeah. DevOps Dreaming was my first Salesforce conference, and TDX was my second. But the scale of TDX, just like other people have said, it's absolutely, until you've actually experienced it. I don't know, imagine Dreamforce is probably just that times 10, but it was an experience to say the least. Absolutely massive. And I was on my own as well, didn't know anyone. But I think that just adds to the fun because you've got to talk to more people then.
Yeah, events at that scale, they sure, are a path to converting introverts into extroverts, because like you said, you just have to kind of get on with it and and talk to people, even if it's just somebody like manning a booth at at one of these sort of partners, or even Salesforce themselves obviously have their booths as well. It's if you want to find out about something, you have to ask in many respects. I know there's sessions that you can go on, learn, and not need to necessarily interact, but yeah, that's how communities are built. That's how alliances are formed. It's how we kind of gather together and help each other. So yeah, just despite appearances and despite my job of being out in the community and presenting and talking a lot, for the first 20 years of my life I was very much an introvert. So yeah, I get where that comes from.
Anyone else attend any events this summer and find any, like, I don't know, I'm interested to hear like what kind of value you guys got out of it, or if there was like a particular aha moment or anything, related to maybe it was like a specific talk that you heard, or I don't even know, one of those sort of spontaneous moments that can only happen when you're in person, but anything like that for anyone?
I went to London World Tour, and that was my first conference. I'd been to some user groups in Birmingham, but that was my first kind of big one. And for me, I think what was really great was just seeing the breadth of what everybody was doing and what they were using Salesforce for, and so many industries and so many different companies and just so much stuff that they were doing. And it kind of just sort of broadens your horizons, doesn't it? And just makes you understand what's possible that you hadn't even considered.
Anyone else have that experience at one of their first events? Because I know, like, I feel like, you know, you first start out in Salesforce, right? And you just think like, oh, you're just acquiring all this information at such a rapid clip, right? And you have this like thought that like, oh, eventually I'll like master all of these things. And then you get to a certain point in your journey where you're like, oh my God, there's so much, this is so overwhelmed. Like, how am I ever gonna, and then you get to a point eventually where you're like, okay, now I can start to apply some of this stuff. And now I can, you know, start to like feel good about like applying, you know, some of the learnings that I've had. And I think equally when you come to an event for the first time, you start having maybe even more of those moments where you start to think like, okay, maybe this isn't as overwhelming, you know, as I may have thought. And actually there are some really useful sort of like snippets that I can take away from this, where I have enough of the knowledge now to know that I sort of like know what I'm missing, or know, you know, at least a direction that I can go in to like steer myself to find things that are useful. And I think that often those happen when, you know, you're in those in-person events, because you're able to put yourself in a position where you can go and find that information or seek it out. Anyone else to
I
share?
think for me, one of the things about being in the user sessions and the kind of talks is it kind of helped me quite a bit with some of the imposter syndrome that I suffer. Is when you're sitting in a room and somebody asks a question, you're like, I know the answer to that one. Or you ask a question and somebody turns around and she goes, that was a really good question. I you know, I wouldn't have thought to ask that. And you think, okay, I'm not like somebody here who's only pretending to know how to use Salesforce. You know, these people are all doing the same job as me, and they've got questions that I could have answered myself, or, you know, they're saying, no, that's a valid question for you to ask. And it's quite validating, really, that you don't have to be an absolute expert. But I think there's very few people who are absolute experts in Salesforce, because it is just so vast.
And sometimes with that as well, what you might find, there's a sort of related to that, there was a story I had from Czech Dreaming, where I was sitting in one of the sessions, and I was in Chrissy Marshall's session on dynamic forms, and somebody asked a question which Chrissy didn't know the answer to, and she decided on the microphone to go, Mark, do you know the answer to that? And it was this just weird question where someone was like, can we use a before save floor to skip required fields? I was like, no, it's the answer. But yeah, but sometimes as you go along with these events, you build relationships up where you know, people can either do something like that, or it's just kind of like drop you a message and just be like, hey, how's things going, or I'm stuck on this, can you give me a hand? That kind of
Didn't Melissa pick on you as well, Mark, to answer a question in her consequence scanning set? You must just have one of those faces that people feel they can pick on.
I think it's just more that somehow I've managed to get myself known a bit too much.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure that at London's Calling, didn't you correct Chrissy on one of the points that she'd made about dynamic forms?
No, I chipped in on one of the questions, because somebody asked about a new feature that was coming for dynamic pages, which was I keep forgetting the title because it's such a weird title, but it's multi-object entities. And someone asked how that works, and it was just like, yeah, this is how it works. I had actually seen it actually in practice a few weeks before, and it's like, yeah, I can tell you what that's going to do. Yeah. And Rob's got his hand up again.
Yeah, sorry, I don't like to sort of talk over, so I tend to use the hand icon quite a bit. No, from what Mark was saying, it just reminds me of how I ended up at Gearset. So there was a joint London developers, London admins combined group. I can't remember, it was tail end of last year, or no, it was beginning of this year. And a couple of the guys had come down and they'd done a presentation, and as you always get, there were you know, questions from the audience. And you know, I've been a fan of the product even before I joined the company. You know, it's like that old you know, that old shaver advert. You know, I liked it so much I bought the company. Well, I joined the company, but Yeah, there was a lot of questions, and it was like, do you mind if I answer that one? And then I was like, sort of answering, sort of other audience member questions. And about a month or two later, would you like to come and work for us now? and here we are. But no, it's been fun, and I think it definitely shows, what you're saying about imposter syndrome, that when you're amongst your peers, you start, especially as a solo admin where you haven't really got any peers in your company, when you're in the community, you start to realize, actually, yeah, I know things. I know some good things, and it builds your confidence, which then leads on to you trying new things and exploring more of Salesforce. Yeah, and before you know it, you've got like 20 certifications, and you are the go-to expert, and it builds. It's not an overnight thing, but I think it certainly helps to grow the confidence. When you can share those stories amongst yourselves in the community.
Yeah, definitely, and that's something that I, just as a slightly selfish, not selfish, but shameless plug on our side, that's something, if there's anybody who comes to the group, whoever wants to kind of like share their story, let us know, because we're always open for more speakers, and it's if you would ever see kind of like how the hours that has been used up over the last couple of years looking for speakers, it's quite a bit more than so if anybody ever wants to kind of just share that, what their story is, or just yeah, we're always open to that. But yeah, I mean, does anybody else have anything else they want to mention, talk about on this topic? Or
I know what we haven't asked, Mark, tangentially. Who's got new certs since the last meeting?
When was the last meeting? Yeah, no, not quite.
No. What was the last one you got?
Advanced.
You said not quite.
That was in April.
Oh, well done. Nice.
Yeah. Is anybody else working on any? I've got 3 I'm working on at the moment.
I've been very lazy, but I think my next one up is data architecture and management, or whatever it's called this week. It's like the last one going before I unlock one half of the pyramid of doom. But yeah, it's finding time for it. But I did see a huge swathe of people getting the new business analyst one. That one seems to be popular.
Yeah. It's almost so they've changed the passing grade of that in the last week.
Oh, have
Yeah.
they?
Yeah, it's now 72%. It was 62% when we started getting it on week 1.
Wow.
I think there was a growing sentiment amongst people that are saying, actually, this one might be pitched a little low for that pass rate, and I think Salesforce probably recognized that and bumped it up a little bit. There were people that managed, and this is no disrespect to people that got it, because there are questions on there that you're going to have to think about. But I think given how many people passed it on day 1 when the study materials hadn't even been available, I think Salesforce thought, yeah, maybe we haven't quite got this one quite right. But fair play. I mean, I looked at some of the sample questions and thought, yeah, I don't think that one's in my area. But yeah, it's always the same with new certificates, though. It was the same with the was it UX designer one? I think that one, a lot of people swarmed on, and Salesforce used that to fine tune it a little bit.
Yeah, and so that was also also a good example, and I did that last year. So I've got BA, strategy designer, and non-profit cloud. Hopefully, all to try and get passed by the end of the year. We'll see.
That would be awesome.
Did you have your hands up, Angela, to say that you get the BA one?
Oh yeah, I got BA on day 3, and I'm happy to report I got over 72 or whatever it is in all of the modules. So I think I still would have passed it this week. And I got strategy designer, as I was part of the team that wrote strategy designer as well. But I got that in May when that launched.
Yeah.
I'm as yet uncertified, but I got a voucher at a previous session, so I need to get studying for my admin.
Well, I was going to say, if I may plug for strategy designer, it's one of those that doesn't have any prerequisites.
Okay.
So
I'm
that's an
gradually
alternative
sort of
choice.
working through the content for strategy designer. I may do the exam, but I really like the content. It's
Well, yes,
really
pleased to hear it.
in my role of kind of all things to everyone stroke architect.
It's sorry, Susanna, it's so relevant for architects, so relevant. And I've been hearing that elsewhere in the world, I've heard from some people that some companies are making it mandatory for their architects, because essentially it's an exam on what should we build. How do you make that decision?
Yeah, and it's just, you know, and a lot of the architecture stuff that you do, it's like, oh well, yeah, I mean that makes sense, we've been kind of doing that, and that makes sense, we've been kind of doing that, but actually having it spelled out and expanded on and really made clear, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
no, actually what we've got here is a design opportunity, so we're going to go with the how might we approach, and we're going to look at this. And I thought, well, actually this is going to really help the way that I engage with our business users.
Yeah, having frameworks for things that you like, as you say, that you were probably doing anyway, but now you've got a framework for it.
Yeah, loving it.
I know Andrew had his you were maybe ready to contribute, Andrew.
No, I was just scratching my head. Although I did pass the BA one on day one. One thing that I'm a little bit confused with the BA one though is the prerequisite to be an admin certified first, because I know that people that have no interest in being an admin but want to be a BA, and I just feel like it's something that shouldn't be a prerequisite for that exam.
No, I'd be inclined to agree with that. You know, not all BAs are going to be hands-on in the org and making changes, you know, which is bread and butter of what an admin is. Yeah, so I think, yeah, there's definitely a conflict there in my mind.
Yeah. On the other side of that, though, because I think I can see arguments on both sides of the coin. So in some sense, a BA, it could be very beneficial for them to know, not necessarily know enough about the inner work, the kind of how Salesforce works, in order to help build up the requirements and all of that kind of side of things. So I can understand why. I don't necessarily think it needed it, but I can understand the argument for it. But that might be just me.
I think the argument is this is not a business analyst certification. It's a Salesforce business architect. I'll just go and shut up now. I'm getting the words mixed up. Business analyst, Salesforce business analyst certification, and it's possibly the thing is, like, in order to make sure that you're a Salesforce business analyst, we haven't maybe got the questions right, but just be an admin as well. But you know, they don't want to ask the admin questions, but you do need to know that.
Yeah.
I don't think I articulated myself particularly well.
No, I get that. I guess we'll kind of wrap up with this very brief comment, just so we can move on. But on that kind of front, I can, one things I have seen from a piece of work I've been doing recently is how badly a project or a piece of work can go, or how challenging it can be if something is generated through a business analyst process where they don't really have the Salesforce skills lined up with that side. So you can have, oh, we can make Salesforce do all of this, and then you sit and go through and you look at how the project goes, you get into the weeds of it, and you go, yeah, this isn't going to work because there hasn't been enough consideration into how Salesforce works as a platform for that. So yes,
you just change on the fly and call it agile.
Iterating, that's right.
Yes. But with that in mind, shall we move on? Because I guess we could talk about all this stuff like all night long, quite easily. And we do have a guest speaker with us tonight, so we'll pass over to Rob, who's going to be talking to us all about DevOps. So Rob, I'll pass over to you and let you introduce yourself, and we'll go for the presentation. And then,
alrighty,
that's our stuff.
Thank you. I shall just get my sharing in order. Alrighty. Hopefully you can see the title slide now.
Yes.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thanks once again, Mark and Christine, for letting me come and talk to you guys today. It's my first outing with a user group since I joined Gearset, although I have sort of spoken at user groups generally before. So what I want to do for you today is hopefully try and demystify DevOps for you as best I can. So I know it's one of these things that's been kind of increasingly talked about recently, with things like DevOps Center coming out from Salesforce, etc. So I want to sort of try and explore a little bit about what's involved with DevOps. So firstly, by way of background, as is traditional, I am Rob Cowell, and I'm also Rob Salesforce, as you can see on my t-shirt. I'm a DevOps advocate over at Gearset, so I'm hoping to sort of try and share DevOps knowledge, best practice, and some of the sort of processes around that with the community. But before that, I was a Salesforce dev/architect/dog's body for around about 12 years. So I've done quite a few deployments in my time. So I think, you know, DevOps is definitely something that I can talk to in general. So as for Gearset, they're the leading Salesforce DevOps and disaster recovery platform. They've got a complete DevOps solution across all the core pillars of DevOps. But what I want to do today is kind of talk more about Salesforce DevOps in the general case. I'm definitely not here to sell you anything unless you really want me to, in which case I'd love to talk more afterwards. But yeah, I'm definitely not here to do a sales pitch for Gearset. What I want to do is try and sort of make people have a better awareness of what Salesforce DevOps looks like, what it actually is if you're not familiar with the term, and kind of sort of talk to some of the things that would allow you to start or continue that journey depending on where you are at the moment. So with introductions covered, I want to talk about some of the areas that I want to cover off today as we kind of find out a bit more about DevOps. Some of you, as I say, may be already on your DevOps journey. Some of you will be finding out about it for the first time. So I want to kind of make sure that we get a good overview of that today. So, you know, we want to sort of look at, you know, why it's becoming more talked about at the moment. And to give you an indication of that, if we look at something like London's Calling that we were talking about, I hear through the grapevine, there were 23 submissions on the subject of DevOps to London's Calling. Obviously, not all of them got selected. We need to cover other topics, but it just kind of shows you how much, you know, DevOps for Salesforce is on people's minds at the moment. So we're going to talk about what it actually is and what's involved, and why it's so important in the Salesforce space. And then we're going to start sort of digging into the weeds a little bit around what, you know, Salesforce DevOps looks like and what success in that space looks like for you. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a little bit around sort of where we can find out more that I won't have time to cover today. So as I mentioned a few times now, you know, it is being talked about a lot, especially with Salesforce announcing their new DevOps Center, which I believe is public beta at the moment. I don't think it's gone general availability just yet. But we're not going to go into that specific product, or in fact any specific product today. But it does kind of indicate there's a renewed focus on like improving the experience of moving your changes around, you know, with better accuracy, so you don't have failed deployments so much, smoother delivery, so it's much easier to pick up, you know, all the dependencies, etc. And you know, all those type of factors that you want, you know, for your deployments. The change sets aren't really covering that, and Salesforce has recognized this, hence their kind of shift in direction with DevOps Center. Now, as you can see there, you know, we haven't just got our logo there. Well, in fact, we haven't even got our logo there. Oh yeah, top corner. You know, we've got Capado up there. Now, you know, technically, yes, they are a competitor. And like I said, you know, I'm not here to sell you Gearset solutions and either big up our solution or put down somebody else's. You know, it's an ecosystem. There is a Salesforce DevOps space. Your options are many. What I want to talk more about is kind of the DevOps way of thinking. So, like a lot of things in the Salesforce world, you know, there's a few myths and misconceptions floating around. So I think now's probably a good time to start looking at some of the common ones, and start sort of addressing what what DevOps is and isn't. So the big one, it's not just for developers. So if you can change it in Salesforce, regardless of your role, whether you're a dev, you're an admin, you're an architect, you're a business analyst that just happens to have an admin profile, DevOps is going to help you manage that change. Okay, so despite the name DevOps, it's not just for the devs. Okay, you know, configuration changes, declarative flows, you know, all that juicy stuff is equally valid in this space. And also, it's not just for the big teams. It's not, it's not for the sort of, you know, the big enterprises where you're collaborating with multiple Salesforce teams. You know, you've got like 6 admins, 4 developers, 3 BAs, etc. You know, even as a solo consultant in my previous role, I'd use DevOps to better manage the change delivery for my clients. And even before that, I was a solo developer. So, you know, at an end user, permanent employee. And again, same kind of approach. You know, you have to manage the changes. You can't just go around and poke things in and hope for the best. So the other misconception is that certainly in the Salesforce space, DevOps isn't a specific set of tools. From a technical perspective, as we've just seen, there's like a growing ecosystem of tools from various providers. But I think it's more important to think about DevOps as a mindset. So in many organizations, it can be viewed as a new approach to delivering change that brings the teams together to a common cause and get those changes in the hands of your customers faster, more accurately, you know, so that you can deliver beneficial change to people, you know, more efficiently. And software alone is not going to do that. So tooling and technology and software is kind of only half of the problem, or half of the solution, should I say. So with that said, what is the problem that Salesforce DevOps is actually trying to address here? So imagine, if you will, you've got a Salesforce org with a handful of devs working on changes, or admins for that matter, because we've established that, you know, DevOps is for everybody. So sometimes you're going to have devs working in a shared sandbox, which means they have to kind of cherry pick the right changes for a specific feature that they want to put out. So as a result, they have to kind of keep a tracked list of changes that they want to hand over to an ops team potentially for deployment. So for example, you know, I've been working with a bank. I'm on the tail end of that now before I go to Gearset full time. But in their setup, you know, the developers and the admins of Salesforce don't have production access. There's this kind of separation of concerns, separation of duty thing going on. So we package up our changes and then we hand it off to an ops team who handle the deployment. Now, the ops team handle deployment for everything. They aren't necessarily dedicated to Salesforce. They don't necessarily understand Salesforce. They understand needing to deploy things. On the other side, we've got the devs and the admins that are managing the Salesforce change, but they can't get them anywhere. So you've got this slight disconnect between the end-to-end process of getting changes out to your users. And that's kind of a big part of what DevOps is trying to do. There's a lot of, you know, back and forth between ops and dev teams where there's an issue with the package, you've missed a dependency, or a unit test fails, or some other concern, you know, and it just all adds up to the time it takes to get change out of the door. So it could be that, you know, a whole feature gets held back from a release of multiple features because it's just not quite ready. And because it's all so cumbersome and difficult, and, you know, and things going backward and forward, and email chains and all the other horrible stuff, you know, it becomes so cumbersome that none of the teams want to do this regularly. You know, if there's a release coming up, there's this kind of sense of dread. Oh God, you know, we're going to have to go through all this nonsense again. You know, so at best, you know, you may be going to deploy once per sprint, but sometimes it's even less frequently than that. So what DevOps is trying to do, especially in the Salesforce world, is reduce that friction between the teams. So with a combination of best practice, proper communication, modern tooling. Not only can you kind of get your changes out faster and smoother, but a lot of it can actually be automated, which is great, because you show me a hard-pressed admin that doesn't want less manual tasks, and I'd be very surprised. So it does free up the teams to kind of work on the stuff that's more important to the customers, and not the grunt work of getting that change out of the door. So now that I've got you hopefully intrigued by some of the possibilities that DevOps can bring, let's have a look at kind of what it's going to take to actually get that out the door. So there might be this heavy focus on tooling, and a lot of folks' perception is, okay, we need to do DevOps, let's just get Gearset, let's just get Capado, let's just get any of the other kind of platforms that might be out there. Because DevOps does solve a fairly technical problem. But the other side of DevOps is much more of a cultural one. And that's kind of the harder part of DevOps adoption to address, really. Now, DevOps as a concept, so outside of the Salesforce space, just kind of in a general sense, has been around for around about 15 years. So it's not particularly anything new. But other non-Salesforce platforms are much further ahead with that because of some of the unique constraints and quirks of Salesforce as a platform. But it does mean that that allows us to have plenty to learn from. And the cultural challenges, so the non-technical parts of that, are almost identical regardless of what the platform is that we're looking at there. And there's two common themes that these cultural challenges within an organization can have that we tend to see. So the first one is what we call inertia. So old habits that are hard to break. And what we see sometimes is that teams can add in all these technological improvements without really assessing where the actual difficulties or bottlenecks in their process are. One of the biggest cultural barriers that we see in proper robust DevOps processes is that's the way we've always done it mentality. It's very hard to break that. And even if you've got a new technical process in place, the temptation to kind of bypass that process for convenience is actually quite strong. So if you don't have like the whole team on board, and we're talking your admins, your devs, your ops team, if you have one, the whole sort of end-to-end delivery, even if just one person is, for example, still using change sets, it undermines the whole process, because it means that when you kind of do your next deployment and you're looking at sort of change sets, looking at proper DevOps and a process, there may be unaccounted for changes. So really what you want to do is get a team-wide adoption. You need that kind of across the board buy-in, and make sure that everyone understands the benefits of doing this. When everyone's on board with the same process, things tend to run a lot smoother. We don't want sort of rogues that are kind of stuck in their ways. Then the other barrier that I would say that we see on a sort of process and the way of working aspect is communication. And this is true of pretty much any significant change to processes in an organization. So for example, one that we see quite a lot is through acceptance testing. So the handoff between the dev team and the business users that are doing the acceptance testing, and sometimes those goals can get a little misaligned, which means that features get stuck in UAT a lot longer. Now, that's not necessarily the fault of any of the teams involved. It's just there's this lack of alignment between those teams and the process that requires this type of handoff between those two silos. So again, this comes back to, if you get the process right and the ancillary parts of, this is our new way of working correct, the process stands a much better chance of succeeding, regardless of which technology stack you're going to go with. So having looked at those cultural aspects, the human element, if you will, let's look at some of the more technical elements that drive DevOps success. So the first one I want to put up there is version control. And I think, in my opinion, that's the most important technical element of a modern DevOps stack. So if you do nothing else in your whole DevOps journey, get your changes into source control, because suddenly you've gained a backup, you've gained a log of who changed what and by whom. You can have peer review of those changes before they move through your environments. So, you can find issues earlier, and that helps reduce the chances of mistakes slipping through. And then as your DevOps process matures, your version control is going to be like the central linchpin of that tool chain that supports the entire process. As we move through some of these sort of other items that we've got on the slide there. So, thanks to Salesforce's test coverage requirements, we're familiar with unit tests. Even as an admin, you may have got snagged up in a deployment where something somewhere in that chain hasn't got enough test coverage, for example. And the unit tests and the test coverage stuff you get for free from Salesforce. So it's an obvious thing, but it's quite often overlooked. But it is a very easy and important first steps, because DevOps tools can execute your unit tests automatically as part of your change lifecycle, so that you know early whether your deployment, as it moves up through different Salesforce environments, has got a good chance of succeeding and and deploying first time. And one less thing to do manually is always helpful, as we've talked about. Code maintainability should improve with DevOps process, because, like I mentioned, we can have peer reviews of changes. We have something called static code analysis that looks for common issues in code. These are kind of defined by sets of rules that say it must have this naming convention, it must not do this. And it's all driven off Salesforce best practices. We use a common Salesforce. Well, it's a tool that's beyond Salesforce, but someone's kind of moved it to Salesforce to work with Apex, called PMD, and it's a great. I used it even sort of at the point of development. So for those of you that are on the sort of the code side of the fence, that's a fantastic tool. But it means that these types of tools allow us to have better quality deliverables as we're moving our changes. Then we've got CI/CD, so continuous integration and continuous delivery. So this is the technical bit that people think is DevOps. It's actually just a part of DevOps. But a lot of people think that this is what defines DevOps. Continuous delivery is the overarching goal of DevOps, to support that kind of agile development, agile delivery piece. And basically what it means is just putting our changes into the hands of users as close to those changes having been finished as possible. And automation is the key to unlocking that. If we have processes that will pick up our changes from source control when they're checked in, or when they're approved, following peer review, and then we automate the running of the testing and the analysis of that, and then we automate the moving those and potentially deploying or validating them in the next environment, we can start to see how much time we're going to be saving that. And so continuous integration and continuous deployment, they're grouped together for a reason, because they kind of work off the back of each other. But they're the ways that we can get closer to that goal of faster delivery. So the last part of this that I want to cover is disaster recovery. It would be foolish to think that that DevOps is the silver bullet that solves everything and that everything's going to deploy first time every time. We do have a good strike rate with these processes and tools, but it's not infallible. And there's going to be those times where you want to be able to do two things. One is you want to have backup. So backup we consider to be part of that DevOps process, because disaster recovery, rollback, etc., is all kind of wrapped up into that. It's around your operational efficiency, but also there's overall benefits to backup as well. So we're talking in this scenario, in a Salesforce sense, we're talking backing up not just data but metadata as well, so we can go back to a given point in time if we need to. It's important to remember that with backup, your backups are only as good as your ability to restore them. I've seen scenarios where people are backing up to a SQL database, which is great, but rehydrating that back into Salesforce with all your related objects and your lookups and everything intact, yeah, good luck with that one if you're doing it that way. So, you know, a lot of people, you know, tend to sort of forego that step and forget that. So I think it's a very vital part of a DevOps strategy there. There's also a ton of metrics that you can apply to DevOps, and this is kind of how you measure how successful your DevOps process is or is becoming. There's lead time, cycle time, deployment frequency, etc., etc. But I like to try to group those into kind of 3 broad areas rather than kind of look at the individual metrics. And the first of those is what I call agility, which is how fast can we respond to and deliver beneficial change? You know, how often can we release? How long does a release take? You know, we quite often hear, you know, startups and you know, technology experts saying, you know, release early, release often. And agility is really the measure of how we meet that goal. You know, how close to that are we getting? So the next one up that I tend to group things in is accuracy, and that tends to be characterized by the one key statistic, which is change failure rate. So how often do new changes that we're deploying break, either at the point of deployment or after deployment, we've deployed something and it's not working in whichever environment we've gone to. So, you know, what we'd aim for in a good DevOps process is to reduce that change failure rate. We want more successes, less failures. Which leads us quite nicely onto the third grouping that I have, which I call resilience, which is measuring how quickly we can recover and come back to business as usual, whether that's rolling back a change that wasn't quite right or restoring back to an earlier point in time because something got lost, whether it's data or metadata. And like I said, you know, your backups are only as good as your ability to restore them. So resilience is the measure of that against time. You know, how quickly can we get back up and running and where we should be? Okay. Now, using these metrics, obviously, you can start to see how successful you're becoming in your DevOps as you grow in that journey. And it is a journey. You know, it's important to remember that, you know, like so much in Salesforce, you know, you're not necessarily going to be able to cover everything on day one. And Salesforce itself grows so much, I don't think you're going to cover it on day 501, to be fair. You know, no one's expecting you to get all of the process absolutely perfect at once. So you have to kind of think of it as a set of iterative improvements. So maybe start with the basics, like, you know, get your stuff into source control, or even before you're on that step, you know, if you're just starting out. Change sets technically are a change management process. You know, I'd suggest that we start moving away from them, but you know, it's that first rung on the ladder. And then as we move up, we start improving our processes as much as we improve our technology stack, you know, and start adopting it. And the way I like to kind of think of this is, you know, an approach for climbing that ladder or stairway or whatever, however you want to picture it, is to pick an aspect of the DevOps process and start working with your chosen tooling and do it manually. So for example, you know, you can do a compare and deploy between 2 environments, pick up the changes, package them up, deploy them, you know, see that succeeds, run your tests against it, you know, all of that kind of manually. Once you've got that absolutely dialed for 10, 20 deployments, then start looking at maybe automating that, and then pick the next thing that's potentially missing from your process. And then over time, you'll get to a point where actually you have a pretty good pipeline and things are being sort of reasonably automated. You know, you're checking changes into your source control, and those changes don't necessarily have to be code changes. If you've changed a page layout or added some fields or tweaked your record types and stuff, you know, those are changes that can go into source control. And then your automation will pick those up and start your processes and moving things along. So yeah, you know, start small, automate, move on, and before you know it, you'll be at the top of that tree that we've got there. I've talked about ladders, stairways, trees. Choose your own metaphor, but I think you get where I'm going with that. So why are we doing all this DevOps stuff? Well, ultimately, it makes us happy. Okay, hence the picture there. You know, if you've ever spent hours working on a deployment, fighting with the change set UI where you have to kind of do it a page at a time and then go back because you've forgotten something or there's a dependency or whatever, remembering all the dependencies, then discover there's not enough test coverage on those. Wouldn't it be much happier if you didn't have to deal with all of that? That's kind of what DevOps is offering. And if we look through the business lens, the management and the sort of high level view, there's definitely a marked improvement on your Salesforce return on investment. So from our latest Salesforce DevOps survey that we did, 85% of people responding to the survey are confident that it will improve their Salesforce return on investment, because you're able to deliver what the business wants from Salesforce sooner, more accurately, and safely. So if I've done my job well tonight, hopefully you're all now keen to get started on that DevOps journey, or continue further along it if you've already started. And if you are, fantastic, and we're here to help you along the way. First one we have is our DevOps Launchpad site. So it's got a bunch of self-paced, self-study modules that cover all the various aspects of Salesforce DevOps, mostly, not exclusively, but mostly in a product neutral way. So it's teaching you Salesforce DevOps best practice, not necessarily Gearset best practice, although there are some modules that help you apply those using Gearset. So in some ways it's very similar to Trailhead. There are self-paced, self-study. You can go and sign up, choose which ones you get, answer the questions, to confirm your knowledge. It's completely free to sign up and to learn on. And you can find that at devopslaunchpad.com. There's no dependency on being a Gearset customer. I don't think you even need Salesforce. I think you can just go sign up and learn more about that. So I'd encourage folks to go and have a look at devopslaunchpad.com. Then additionally, we've got an event coming up in September. It is down in London, so apologies to those of you for which that's a bit of a journey, whether even within the UK or beyond. But we will have quite a selection of topics and speakers from the Salesforce community. So it's not just us Gearset folks preaching to the crowd. We've got some sort of big name speakers from the Salesforce community at large. So registration's open for that one at the moment, as is the call for speakers. So, if you've got experiences or, some thought leadership around DevOps or deployments or anything you think that would be relevant in that space, we'd love to hear from you. So you can find out more about that from our event website, which is devopsdreaming.com, or you can scan the QR code there. I'll leave the code on the screen a little bit just to give you a bit of a chance to do that. But again, message me, message Mark or something. We can always give you the site there. It's DevOps Dreaming without the G on the end .com. I say we previously ran one in Chicago. As Chris said, he managed to make that one out in Chicago. I'm very jealous because I didn't. But yeah, we're bringing it home. We're bringing it back to the UK in London. And I suspect there may be other venues later in the year or early next year coming up. We haven't got anything definitive on that I can tell you about at the moment, but yeah, I think we'll make sure we get as wide an audience as possible.
It was very, very cold in Chicago, so it's probably best off that you missed that one and came down to this one in London.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, we're September the 8th. I think it will still be reasonably warm in the UK. So, yeah. And if not, we're all indoors anyway. So hopefully, I have helped demystify DevOps a little bit for you today. I look forward to hearing about some of the great things that you deliver using DevOps in your work, powered by the principles of DevOps. I'm happy for folks to get in touch with me. As my t-shirt says, you can find me on Twitter as Rob Salesforce, or you can look up Rob Cowell on LinkedIn. I know a couple of you have already. more than happy to talk more about how we can help, whether it's using Gearset or best practice in general. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Rob. I'm not sure why videos just randomly turned off on me there. Yeah. So, did anybody have any questions they wanted to ask? If you're happy to take questions, Rob.
No, absolutely. If I can.
Yeah. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask them. If not, we do have a quiz that we'll be moving on to if there's no questions.
Hey Rob, Milan this side.
Hi.
So I've been working on implementing Salesforce CPQ as a developer and consultant for past few years. And one of the major issues that we face as part of this deployment process is CPQ is very data heavy implementation, because not just metadata, you have to migrate your entire product and pricing configuration as well. So what is the best strategy to do that? Do you have some kind of solution for that? Data migration as well.
Yep. Yeah. So if I may put my Gearset specific hat on, because I genuinely don't necessarily know what everybody else is doing, but certainly Gearset does support CPQ deployments for both the metadata aspects and the data aspects. Additionally, we do have across the whole spectrum of Salesforce, not just CPQ. We do cover data deployment. So, for example, things like preceding sandboxes, restoring data from backups, moving fixed bits of data between orgs, etc. CPQ is very much part of that. We do have specific parts of our product that handle CPQ. I will just temper that a little bit with, I am still comparatively new at Gearset and I haven't necessarily learned all of those aspects. But what I would suggest is one of two things. You can either shoot me a note and I'll hook you up with the right folks to talk to on that one. Alternatively, if you just jump onto gearset.com, you don't have to log in if you're not a Gearset customer yet, or our in-app chat is absolutely the fastest way to get through to our customer success team. Those guys know everything there is to know about Gearset, and especially on the CPQ side, and we'll be able to point you in the right direction, whether that's using Gearset, which of course we'd love you to do, but also in a more general sense, we're there to help the community and make sure that you get the best advice. We want to kind of make sure that we are the kind of deployment experts, whether it's the core platform or CPQ. So yeah, either of those options I would suggest. But yeah, I think we can definitely help in some way or another. I say either ping me a note or jump on the in-app chat at gearset.com.
I'll jump in there and say that's part of what we're using Gearset for. So we have a live CPQ and billing at the moment. So we use the Gearset data add-on to manage our configuration data, because like you say, it's really critical for CPQ and for billing, but we've got a lot of other critical data that we need to maintain in our source control, and we're bringing field service lightning in, and again we're going to use CPQ for managing, Gearset for managing that. It works well for us, and I think the thing that separates it from others, I'm doing more of a selling job than you are here, Rob. The pricing model is more appropriate for smaller enterprises than the big guys like Prodly Mover.
Yeah, and what I will just add as a final touch to that is that I know from speaking to the product team internally that there are even more CPQ specific features on private pilot at the minute. So select big CPQ folks. So expect more and more capabilities from the CPQ side of things to be coming soon. But as I say, it's non-committal. I do work for Gearset, and I do know that we have that. But there's absolutely no obligation to to have to use us. I want to make sure that in tonight's session, I'm trying to sort of convey best practice across the board, regardless of the tools that you use.
And it is costing our business money to have a product to do it, but the prospect of trying to maintain that data without a specialist product, I mean, it's just too frightening to even think about doing. So that it's the business case is strong, so we spend the money.
Yeah, it's good to hear it's working well for you, Susanna. So thank you for that.
Great, cheers. And any other questions? Well, by that round of science, I guess we can move on to the quiz that we've got.
Awesome. That's also me driving that one today. So give me just a second, and I shall switch tabs and get the quiz going somehow. Exit full screen. Go to there. Oh no, it's logged me out. Give me just a second. This is going to be fun. What was my username? So tonight we're very kindly borrowing the London group's Salesforce instance because they have the quiz stuff set up in there. So give me just a second. I need to get back into that. I forgot it was going to time me out. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing just so I can get to my email and find the login details again. Bear with me.
Cool. No worries.
Talk amongst yourselves.
It's been really good. So thank you again, Rob, for.
No worries.
And hope everybody has enjoyed it as well. And if there's any other particular topics, I know we did a Mentimeter poll. Well, actually, no, it wasn't even Mentimeter. It was some Google program thing, which I forget the name of it at the moment. We did that earlier. But if there's any specific topics you want us to cover, let us know as well, and we can look at doing what we can on that.
Okay, I think we're back in business. Hopefully, you can see the link and or the QR code there. Can you see that, Mark?
I can see the QR code and I can see the link. Yes.
Okay. All right. So it looks like some of you are very quick off the mark and registering there. It looks like you've figured it out already, but just in case. So if you go to that link on either your browser or your mobile, it works on both, and just quickly register as a quiz participant, player, call it what you will. You'll be able to enter the quiz. So there are a selection of questions. It's multiple choice, so just like doing a certification or a trailhead. And the rules are very simple. It's get the right answer and get the right answer first. The correct answer per question will get 1,000 points, and then progressively down from there for the the second fastest, third fastest, etc. You don't get anything for a wrong answer, unfortunately. And then at the end of the quiz, whoever's got the highest score wins the prizes, which I believe Mark and Kristin will tell you more about now.
Yeah, so what we're going to do for prizes is we have a budget, so we'll get some swag prizes from the Trailhead store for those who win, and I do have a one spare, but I have an extra large Trailhead t-shirt which we can give off for swag, but so either the person who wins that would have to either be extra large or willing to wear a bigger t-shirt.
Just as a brief aside on that one, Mark, I went to a meetup somewhere in London. I can't remember if it was admins or devs, and the one of my smallest friends in the community won an XXL Trailblazer hoodie. So I swapped it for one of our Shirtforce t-shirts with him, and I jokingly said that I'd grow into it. And over the course of 2 years of lockdown, it fits nicely now. So yeah, don't discount the XL and XXL stuff. It'll fit eventually, especially if you wash it enough.
And this one is actually one I got from Europe, so it might be slightly smaller than the average XL because
okay,
because the sizes can be a little different in Europe.
So we've now got 13 folks signed up for the quiz. I'll let Mark or Kristin tell me when they want me to hit the start button in case anyone else is still trying to sign up there.
I think it hasn't gone up for a little while, so I think we can possibly do that. What I can do, maybe is like computer join after it's started, or
can you just drop the link into the? Oh, I can do that actually. Probably, maybe. Copy, paste. Look at me with technology. Copy, paste. There we go. Oh, Pearl's got the link faster than me as well. Thanks, Pearl. So yeah, either or will work. It's I say, as you can tell from where it says London Dev, we're borrowing London Development Group's Salesforce quiz platform today. We will be building our own at some point, but yeah, they very graciously let us use that tonight. Okay. Oh, we've got some late entrants now. We're up to 15.
Yeah, and we've got 18 there. So I think that's probably everyone, because it looks,
yeah, the three missing are probably me, you, and Kristin.
And that's what it looks like. And being
alrighty,
I'll take part as group lead as well.
Okay, folks, stand by your browsers. Off we go.
Okay, so yeah, so which is the busiest airport in the world by number of daily flights?
There we go, Chris, straight out the gates. So only 2 of you got that one. Okay, tough question though. Tough question from the Newcastle team here. Let's move on to the next one if we're ready.
And this was, which animal is the fastest? Hare, kangaroo, greyhound, or horse?
Depends how motivated they are.
Wait, you can't go wrong with a hare, though. He did beat the tortoise.
Oh, Chris again. Oh, well played, sir. I've got 3 with the right answer this time, but there's still plenty to play for. Don't despair. So we should move on to the next one.
And which is the smallest? Where is the smallest bone in the human body located? The foot, the hand, the wrist, or the ear?
Oh, Katrina, you've beaten Chris to the post this time. So it looks like everyone got that one right. Well done, everybody. It is indeed the ear. On to the next one.
Go on. What colour are the seats in the House of Commons? Green, red, brown, or black?
And apologies to the folks that aren't actually UK based on the call today. Oh,
Yes, 63.
yeah, we got the majority of folks getting that one right though, by the looks of it. Yeah.
I answered with the right colour of button, but it did have the wrong word on it. So I
I did the same thing. Caught out.
Even less points for being that stupid.
Yeah.
Oh well.
I'm not casting aspersions, but any questions in the quiz that aren't about DevOps aren't mine. There will be some questions on DevOps just to see who was paying attention. So let's move on to the next one.
This is where is the Ross Sea located? Australia, Antarctica, North America, or Asia?
Antarctica.
Yeah, and
A lot of smart folks on this call today. I'm impressed. Let's see. Is it a DevOps one next? No.
this is still we're on the Salesforce question. So which is the tallest tower? London, Sydney, New York, or Chicago? And nobody got that right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I must admit, I've seen the answers because obviously I put this together, but I wouldn't have known that one either. So
No.
I used to work in the London one, so yeah, I'd have probably gone London. So
yeah, I didn't know that one either until I saw the answers.
alrighty, next up.
How long has co-CEO of Salesforce, Brett Taylor, been at the company?
I suspect this one's going to be largely guesswork.
Yeah, especially with being years and months. 4 years, 8 months, and nobody got that one right either.
But lots of people didn't get it right in the same way, which is great. We're all working together here, folks. Alrighty, what's up next?
According to LinkedIn, how many account executives are employed by Salesforce in the UK currently? This one might be a bit of guesswork as well.
I think it changes every year. They recycle them.
Yeah. Oh, we've got 500. 500. Yeah.
Ooh. People have got their finger on the pulse here. I like it. Alrighty. As we move into the DevOps section shortly, it's all to play for.
So I think this might possibly be the last Salesforce question. So what is Cloudy the Goat's favorite trailhead badge? MFA, Apex Triggers, Flow, or Platform Basics?
I know which is my favorite.
And Flow got that right with Flow. Yes, that is Cloudy's favorite badge.
Becky's running away at the top here. Can Chris catch her? Let's see.
Okay, sorry, look for Salesforce question. I forgot about this one. How many businesses use a paid version of Slack? Now this might be slightly out of date. The figures have changed, but this is from the last time these were published. 6, yeah, so 156,000.
Well, we certainly use it ourselves.
And that's not just how many Slack users are, that's how many businesses.
Here we go. Now it's DevOps time. Who is DevOps for? Admins, devs, architects, all of the above. Oh, thank you, everyone. You were paying attention. It is indeed for everyone. I've even seen business analysts getting involved, whether they're certified or not. Next up. What is the most important thing to address in DevOps? Tools, culture, both, or making sure there's plenty of biscuits?
I live a very biscuit-centric life.
Oh, well, no one was fooled by the biscuits questions. But yes, it is the balance of both. They're equally important to get right. Next up, what are the 2 common themes that are barriers to DevOps adoption? Change sets and packages, apathy and budgets, inertia and poor communication, or deployment fish and Apex exceptions? It is inertia and poor communication. They will slow down your adoption of DevOps every time. The next one up. What does agility measure when assessing your DevOps performance? How fast you can do Trailhead, how many sit-ups you can do in 5 minutes, how fast you can respond to change, or how fast you can roll back production when it all goes wrong. How fast you can respond. Yeah, the rollback and disaster recovery piece came under resilience rather than agility on that one. Next up. Where can you learn more about Salesforce DevOps? DevOps Launchpad, DevOps Dreaming, speaking to folks like me, or all of the above? It was all of the above. But any one of those is valid. But yeah, all of the above are equally useful strategies. You don't have to do all three, but any combination of. And is there more? No, there isn't. We have a winner, Becky. Well done, Becky. That's a comfortable lead there, I think.
Oh, thank you. I never win anything.
Well, there you go. We've changed all of that with the power of DevOps.
My lucky day.
Well, congratulations, Becky. So I think what we'll probably do is we'll probably go with the swag for the top three. And so if you were in the top three, so that's Becky, Katrina, and Susanna. Well, if you can ensure I've got your details to send stuff, or I can get in touch with you on LinkedIn. For those who I'm not connected, I'm connected with from that list. If let me know busy your email address, and then we can touch base and we'll get something sorted for you and get that sent out. So we'll do. So I think that we can do that. And congratulations again to all the winners. And just as we're wrapping up, I'm going to go back into sharing my screen.
I shall stop mine.
So thanks again, Rob, for helping us with the quiz, and
No
also
worries.
for speaking as well. It's been a really good session, and I think everybody has enjoyed it. And we'll wrap up with the announcements. So let me just go back into my screen, and here we go. So there's a few things, and Chris, are you able to pull in the links from Slack and share them when we go through?
Yeah, I can do that.
Right, cool. No worries, thank you. And yeah, so in no surprise, I'm going to mention Dreamforce. We did talk quite a bit about that at the beginning of the session. Well, it's just to say that registrations have opened up for Dreamforce, and they are, I think it's $1,300 just underneath at the current rate, and the price will go up at some point soon. However, as well, Dreamforce is also going to be streaming on Salesforce Plus as well. So if you're not inclined or aren't able to go, you will be able to watch it on Salesforce Plus when it comes out, and that's happening on the 21st to the 23rd of September, and I believe I've got my dates right there. I should know the dates because I've booked flights and accommodation for those dates. But yeah, so Dreamforce is happening, and it should be quite an interesting event this year, with it being a bit bigger capacity wise compared to last year. Next up, just a conference I thought would be good to share. Pack Dreaming, or Pakistan Dreaming, launched last year. It's happening again this year on August 20th, and it is happening virtually. So you've no need to travel all the way over to Pakistan to go to this event. You can enjoy it from the comfort of your own home, and there's some really good sessions that's going to be coming out from that. I've seen some of the sessions have been accepted, and I myself have been offered to speak 3 times at the conference. So it's going to be a good event, and it was really great last year as well. And it's a great team that are managing that event and are running that. Moving on, just a little subtle plug as well. The Skills for Success series that some of you might have seen, that's actually wrapped up now. This was a blog series where a bunch of people had gotten involved with from the community to write a post about each of the 14 admin skills that Salesforce have said are what they think are the core skills to the admin role. So I just want to really quickly plug that all of the posts are now available for that series, including one from Luke as well, which was great to see from that. Next up, just for a mention, just because Salesforce are promoting it at the moment, and also while Katrina's on a call working potentially towards first exam, if you get your first certification at any time between the 1st of September, I don't know why this is out of date, but there's a thing going on at the moment where you can get, if you earn your first certification, and you get a free one, free voucher if you earn your first certification. So that might be interesting if you haven't got a certification yet, or if you know somebody who is about to sit a certification, that might be something they might be interested in as well. Yeah, but we don't currently have any vouchers that we're earning to give out at this stage. Next up, little plug for myself as well. I am co-launching a conference in November. We are finalizing the exact details of that. But I wanted just to plug this because we did extend the speaker submissions out up until the end of this month. The conference is Automation Dreaming, and it is focused, as the title says, on automation. So we are looking for speakers who are interested in talking automation across the Salesforce ecosystem. So we've got sessions that have been submitted around marketing automation. We've got ones that have been submitted around code-based automation through Apex and other tools, and we've got quite a few ones on Flow as well. But we would love to get to see some more submissions come through. So if that is something that you're interested in, we are looking for speakers. However, alternatively, the tickets will hopefully be going live in the next month or so. We are just finalizing a couple of things before we release tickets for that event, but that should be in the next couple of months.
Is that automationdreaming.com by any chance?
It is, yes.
Okay, cool. It's just it's not on the slide, so I was just double checking I was going to the right place.
Yeah, so if you're not on, this link should all be coming in the chat as well.
Perfect.
So feel free to pull the links from there as well. But yes, it is automationdreaming.com, or we'll return you to a Google site. Next up, and there's these last few ones are subtle, or some plugs from myself. Automation Now, if you're interested in Flow specifically, happens on a weekly basis, and it is various sessions talking about different things around Flow. And the reason why I'm specifically mentioning it today is the guest speaker for tomorrow's session is me, and I'll be talking around how you can get a list of record types and export them into a CSV file, which is something that is quite a piece of work that I had to do recently, and started doing this methodology quite a bit in Flow because reports don't work with record types. And I needed a massive list for a client to kind of compare record types recently. So this is the session that I'm doing tomorrow at Automation Hour. And last little bit from me, I think this is the last one. I have this link on the screen will not be valid anymore, but I am actually going to be running a series of sessions on Flow starting in late September. The date is going to be the Tuesday, so it'll be the 27th of September, running up until the 29th of November. And these are a series of 10 sessions on Flow, where the concept is actually less about teaching you the basics of Flow. Like a lot of the courses that come out tell you what a variable is, what each element does, and there will be a bit of that in this program. However, the main focus is actually going through use cases. So we're going to be the idea is that we'll have a use case that we'll give an overview of at the beginning of each session, and then we would build that flow in the session. So if that is something that you would be interested in, we do have early access to registrations for that, and public registrations will be going public on the 1st of August for that. So although you can access it now, it will be going public in the 1st of August, and it'll be interesting to see how many would be interested in that and to attend. We've already had about just under a quarter of the capacity at the moment go just in 48 hours after I sent an update out about it on Tuesday. And I think that is all the announcements, and it is. So just want to say a big thank you again to everybody for coming, and really enjoyed it. And we'll be posting dates out for the next event very soon. We are planning on trying to keep to the monthly cadence as much as possible for the remainder of the year. But yeah, so we'll let people know what the date is for the next one. And again, just want to say a big thank you to everybody for coming. And I will stop the recording now. And if anybody wants to hang around for a bit, I'm more than happy to do that. Although I do have to be off at 8 o'clock. But yeah, so thank you again for coming, and hope to see you at the next one.